This is my journey. Inspired one story at a time, a library of leaders was created. It began as a journey to learn. As time went on, it began to grow. All it needed was a platform, and this podcast was created to listen, to inspire, to share. I am a storyteller, and this is my journey. Welcome to another episode of Profiles in Leadership. I'm your host, Steve Anderson, and this episode is brought to you by Silna Health. That's S-I-L-N-A, the premium front-end RCM company that leverages technology with a team of onshore insurance experts to handle benefit checks, eligibility checks, and prior authorizations. Finally, a vendor that you can trust, like a full-time employee that scales with your business. Just mention the Profiles in Leadership podcast to receive a free trial. Our guest today is John Marvin, who is a visionary entrepreneur, acclaimed columnist, and influential leader dedicated to empowering others to unlock their full potential. As president and CEO of Texas State Optical, John has cultivated a thriving business network while spearheading initiatives in health and wellness consulting and eye care partnerships. With a steadfast commitment to personal growth, John has spent years studying the transformative power of mindset and the inner game in achieving success. Beyond his entrepreneurial endeavors, through his unwavering dedication to making a difference, John Marvin epitomizes the essence of leadership and empowerment, making him a competitive guest for any podcast seeking to inspire and motivate their audience. TSO brings in around $110 million in revenue annually. So, John, welcome to the program. It's great to have you on today.
It's my pleasure to be here, Stephen. Thank you very much.
So give us a little context, just so that we can get started here. You're not an optometrist, I don't believe. And so how did you get into the world of optical services?
Well, I'm not an optometrist. You're correct in that. I first got into the eye care business, or in Texas, we say eye care business.
There you go.
I first got into it in Wichita, Kansas, when I went to work for a group of 9 ophthalmologists. And it was a large surgical practice. And all of their patient population, not all, but the large majority of it, were referred to them by optometrists. So part of my role in that group was to nurture that network of optometry and understand them, what was most important to them. And then later we built a surgical center that I was tasked to head up the development of the surgery center. And we put together a financial structure that involved investment from optometry to help us build that. And so I ended up spending an awful lot of time with optometry. I then moved to Texas in 1989 and was introduced to Texas State Optical through the practice. I came to Texas to join another ophthalmology group, and through them met Texas State Optical. And I discovered them, or became knowledgeable about Texas State Optical from a consumer research study, because my background is marketing management and consumer research, marketing research, and understanding consumers. And so through this study, I found this large segment of primary eye care that was being cared for. These patients were being cared for by Texas State Optical, and therefore they became a group that we wanted to align ourselves with in hopes of getting referrals for surgery.
Okay.
And I remember presenting the data to Texas State Optical's CEO at the time, president, and he didn't want to talk at all about a referral relationship. He just wanted to talk about all the research.
Okay.
So I left the ophthalmology practice and started my own business, marketing management group, and with the focus of working on consumer research. And so I my one of my first sales calls with that was back to Texas State Optical, who I knew and were very impressed with what we had done at the ophthalmology group, and they became a client of mine, and
Okay.
we did a lot of work with them, and ultimately that later translated into me um, ending up being picked up as the president in 2001. So
Okay.
there's a lot that goes in
Yeah,
between,
yeah.
but I won't go into all of that.
Okay.
But
And
that's
so
how I got to where I'm at.
okay. And so explain the optical centers, how they run, and are they partnerships, and do the optometrists have ownership in those? Tell us a little bit about the structure of the business.
Texas State Optical as a business model is a brand license company. And the company itself was founded back in 1936. And so in the early to mid 60s, it had over 300 locations and was extremely well known as a primary eye care practice or business. And but today we take that brand, that iconic brand, and license the use of that to independent practices owned by optometrists. And
Okay.
so, if you're a young optometrist and you want to start your own business, then by licensing the brand from us, you have instant credibility because the brand has got a tremendous amount of consumer value to it. And so, um, that we really don't go much beyond that. We allow them to practice in large part just uh, completely independent. We don't impose a lot of operational requirements on them. We are very mindful of the reputation of our brand and we protect that. And certainly, if someone is abusing it or they're practicing in a way that we don't believe adds value to that brand, then we would revoke it, the license. But for the most part, they're all independently owned and operated and have their own kind of ways of doing business. But that's the beauty of private practice. And that's what people enjoy about going to a private practice is that you end up really with a relationship that's unique to that particular practice. And we want to try to capitalize on that and use it to the advantage of both the brand and the practitioner.
So you don't really go in then and look at their operations or their procedures or whatever and help them be more efficient businesses. You just let them do that on your own, and you just basically brand the name Texas State Optical to the business.
Well, we have a set of standard operating procedures. We have
Hmm.
people that work in the field to consult with the offices. The difference is that we're here to provide assistance and help. We're not dictating to them what they have to do.
Okay.
We have a saying that I coined a long time ago, and that is, we believe in everybody's right to make bad decisions. So
Okay.
the people that
Okay.
are hurt most by those bad decisions are the practitioner themselves. So we're simply here to help, and if they want to take advantage of that, then I think it's wise on their part, but they're certainly not required to do so.
And do you have any training programs like leadership development programs or business acumen programs or anything like that, that if they do want some more help in that area, that you can provide that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We invest quite a bit in staff training to help them
Okay.
train their employees, and then we focus a lot on practice management to help the doctor better operate and run their practice.
Okay, and just for to answer my curiosity, so is that
Sure.
something that I pay for as an optometrist owning a private practice for that, or is that part of what I get out of this licensing agreement? How does it work if I want to engage you more than say the next guy down the block?
Well, no, it's all included in the license agreement. So you
Okay,
pay for the license, and then it comes with a menu of different other types of support services and resources that you can either take advantage of or not.
okay, and if I say was in your organization for a while, and for whatever reason I decided I didn't want to do that anymore. I want to go out on my own, change the name. Could I do that, or do you have non-compete issues with me taking that back?
No, there are no non-competes. You simply the term of our agreement is a 5-year agreement. So when you initially um, come to me and want to license that brand name, you're making a 5-year commitment. At the end of that 5 years, you just simply give me a notice 90 days ahead of time that you no longer are going to license the brand. We accept that, and uh, you therefore have 90 days to remove all presence of that brand from your location, because the lease is in your name. The operation is completely independent. We're just attaching our brand to it through this agreement.
And I think I read somewhere or listened to one of your other presentations where you said that when you took over the organization, it was heavily um, uh, people that were in it were on the end of their career, so to speak. They were older owner operators. So,
Yeah.
and you felt that to sustain this company going forward, you need to attract a younger professional and somebody that's more just starting out as opposed to near the end of their career. So, what do you do to attract that newer professional?
Well, so that was kind of a serendipitous benefit from us in the very beginning in the early 2000s, 2002, 2003, when we decided and frankly recognized the need for growth and adding new locations. The average age at that time was in their mid to late 50s. And the environment was such that many of those practices were not likely to get sold because, as what happens with a lot of private practitioners, they don't reinvest a whole lot back into their business to keep it current. So it makes the selling of the practice at the end of a career much less appealing, and frankly almost as expensive as going out and starting anew and starting from scratch. And so when we decided that we wanted to grow, we recognized that after 6 months of effort that someone who's already established in their practice is unlikely to want to change the name of their practice, and certainly unlikely to want to pay us a fee for a brand that they didn't utilize to build their practice. So that leaves young optometrists who want to start brand new offices as the best prospect for us. And so we began to get very involved in the schools of optometry and the state association. And we took a position that we would be the very best option for them to own their own practice. By licensing our brand, it gives you instant credibility in the marketplace because the brand has got recognition and awareness among consumers. And then through the experience of our other members in our network, you have a community from which you can learn best practices and rely on for help and assistance as you grow. And that became extremely appealing to a lot of young optometrists. And we started growing and opened up. Um, to date, I think we're at about 85 locations that we've opened since we started this in early the early 2000s. And it's worked. It got so predictable that I would be able to sit down with a young optometrist and say, if you'll follow our recipe,
Hmm.
here's what you'll make your first year, your third year, and your fifth year. And every year we'd calculate those numbers, and they, after about 3 years of experience, they locked in, and they haven't changed a whole lot since.
Yeah, that's great. And do you have meetings, like network meetings, where the optometrists get together and share experiences and ideas and marketing theories and things like that?
Yeah, we have an annual meeting that we meet
Okay.
every year. All of our members are in Texas, with one exception, That's a legacy office in Lake Charles, Louisiana,
Okay.
and we treat him like a cousin. And but he's a great guy, and but we have annual meetings, and because everyone is in Texas, we usually have them in we have them in a Texas location. This year we'll be in San Antonio, and it makes it very easy for people to participate. And we call it the family reunion, the Texas State Optical Family Reunion, and because we try to foster a culture of family, that we are a network of family, with a family feeling. We encourage our members to bring their children, their spouses, and we encourage it's vendor supported, and we encourage our vendor partners to bring their families. And we spend about 3 days together and at a family friendly resort. And it really cultures that, I mean, excuse me, nurtures that culture that um, creates this feeling I can really not only rely upon a fellow optometrist, but have confidence in the organization from even our vendor group to be a part of it. And so we treat our vendors like family members and partners as opposed to just simply suppliers.
Okay. And didn't you have a kind of an event? I can't remember exactly when it was. It was before COVID or during COVID, where a lot of private equity came in, money came in, and you lost a lot of your members who decided to sell to that and kind
Mhm.
of reduced your numbers. So tell us a little bit about what happened there and what did you learn from that?
Well, the nature of our agreements, which I mentioned to you earlier, at that time, those agreements had 30-day terms to them. When we started back in 2001, we structured our brand license agreement with a 30-day term, believing that if we can't justify membership in the organization, then we don't want to lock you into some long-term agreement that you simply get frustrated with. We'd rather just shake hands and part ways and be on your way. Well, that's great. One of the downsides to that is that because it's your own and independent practice and it belongs to you, you can sell it to whomever you want to. And if the buyer of that practice decides they don't want to be a part of TSO, it just takes 30 days for them to get out from under the agreement. Private equity started consolidating optometry probably in 2016 in a big way, 2017, but it came into Texas a little bit later than that because of Texas state law that made it a little more challenging for these companies. They figured out a workaround. So in the early 2020, they really came in with a high level of aggression. And to date, we've lost around 40 offices out of our organization. These private practitioners have decided to sell their practice, many of them at an age when you would expect that. And a private equity funded company is able to offer quite a bit more money than a young optometrist that's interested in buying that practice. So I don't begrudge them. In fact, I'm happy for them. I mean, they were able to take advantage of it, and many of them got far richer in the sale of their practice than they would have ever considered or ever had an opportunity to. But from an organization standpoint, it forced us into reevaluating our business model and figuring out how we're going to one retain our members. One of the ways we do that is we extend that agreement to a 5-year agreement as opposed to a 30-day agreement.
Yeah, okay.
And that doesn't prevent it. It just compensates us a little better in the buyout process. And then now to grow offices, another factor that's coming into play is that fewer and fewer young optometrists have any interest in owning their own practice. Most now, the large majority, I mean, I'm talking 80+% of the young optometrists today, see optometry as a very good part-time job. It's not even a full-time profession.
Interesting.
And so That makes it challenging if our business is dependent upon young ODs wanting to own their own practice. If that number is much smaller, then we're competing with a lot of other interest in trying to help them. So we're having to reevaluate kind of the business model. We haven't locked in on a plan just yet. We have several things we're considering. And I'm confident we'll come through this and we'll continue this legacy that started in 1936.
Wow, wow. So that Texas State Optical, that name started way back in 1936.
That's right. That's
That's
right.
that's amazing. So what really intrigues me about this is, a lot of listeners on my program do own physical therapy practices, and
Mhm.
run against the same things. Like, you get to a point where you grow enough and it's harder to keep it going. And, the private equity people, look at that as an opportunity to come in and purchase the practice, but then you kind of lose control, sometimes depending on who you choose as your partner going forward. So there's this tug and pull all the time with that. The other thing that I think is really interesting is you look at, I've been around a while. So back when I first started, it's like every community had a community pharmacy, that was
Mhm.
usually owned by a pharmacist, and everybody knew them, and everybody went there. And now you look at it, and most pharmacy is done out of the big, huge corporate, CVS's, Walgreens, Rite Aid, whatever. And it's hard pressed to find that independent, pharmacist-owned pharmacy anymore. And so, looking at those two examples, pharmacy, and then also, what we see in the physical therapy world, and now what I've just learned about the optometry world, there's very similar pushes there, and so on. So what is, and in a business that supports that, do you feel like, are you optimistic that, the privately owned optometry clinic can continue to make it and do well, or do you think they're really up against, like the pharmacists were?
Well, I mean, the answer to the question you just asked about can an independent practitioner make it and do well? Yes, I'm convinced they can. The dynamics are that, as I mentioned, most young optometrists don't want to own their own business. And so whether or not they could make it and do well is becomes irrelevant if someone doesn't want to own it.
Sure.
And so that is probably having a greater influence than any kind of market pressures on the inability to be successful. Now, the advantage a private practitioner has over a corporate owned location is the private practitioner, the owner of that business, the entrepreneur of that business. An example is when the world went nuts in March of 2020 and shut everything down, our office locations were open in the 1st of April. I mean, we shut down for about 2 weeks, and our owners looked around and go, "Well, we can't sustain this, so
Yeah.
we're going to open back up." Now, the corporate-owned locations, most of them didn't open until August because
In,
the employed optometrists were too scared to go to work. But the
Interesting.
entrepreneur that owned the business wasn't scared, or at least if they were, it was outweighed by the fact that they had a rent payment to make and they had payrolls to cover. And so they were back in business early. And through that, 2020 as a year of aggregate business in our organization, we actually grew in business that year.
Hmm.
So, and I credit all of that, frankly, to the entrepreneur spirit of our organization. So you do have that advantage over the corporate. The other advantage is most corporate entities in optometry don't know how to run the business. They just don't, and because most of them are not corporate businesses that are interested in operating the business. Private equity funded companies, they're a finance business model. They're not a optometry business model. And so the whole focus is on reducing the expense line, increasing EBITDA, so that you can turn around and flip this to another company in 3 to 5. And so the whole focus is not on operations. Entrepreneurs, private practice, they're serving that small community in which they are. So there are a lot of advantages. However, optometry as a profession is not, um, certainly not incentivizing or encouraging private practice. Academics, the schools, the profession or associations are placing a very minimal, if any, value at all on private practice optometry, opting instead for a scope of practice emphasis and licensing, about anybody who can pass the boards. So it's appealing to a different generation and a different group of people within that generation.
It's really interesting. So if I'm an optometry student, I'm sure it's probably like physical therapy school and pharmacy school as well, where, that's a big nut. That's an expensive education. So you're going to go and you're going
Mhm.
to get this education, you're going to come out. So if I don't want to own a business, okay, maybe I can understand that. But if I only want to work part-time, how do I how do I make a living and how do I pay off my school loans and whatever? I mean, what's the motivation there?
Well, I think that one of the things I've observed is that, and this isn't just optometry, this is um, a generation that I'll put under 40 right now, um, is that when, I don't know how old you are, but I know that when I went to school or when I got out of college, the idea of debt scared me to death. I mean, that was, uh, my parents had warned me about it. Don't get crazy. Don't go into debt. It can destroy you. You don't want a bankruptcy. A 27-year-old today or a 32-year-old today, they don't care. I mean, so what if I owe $500,000 in school loans? I mean, they're just not, they don't look at it the same way. And if it takes them the next 40 years to pay off, fine. Where you start to see them wake up is the difficulty they have buying a home or getting married. But all those things, which in my generation were done in the early 20s, are now being done in the early to mid 30s.
Yeah.
So there's this delay in aspects. So they're really not concerned about it. And it's amazing to me. I had a dean of an optometry school say to me in seriousness that based on her experience in the last 10 years, she believes that the age of adulthood in our country should be moved to no less than 25, because the students that she's seeing come into optometry school have the maturity level of people that were 18 20 years ago. And that, I think, has ripple effects. It comes into all aspects of our society and culture. So I think that the this attitude towards part-time, um, and again, it's not optometry only. You've mentioned
Yeah.
physical therapy and pharmacy, but family practice medicine is the same.
Yeah.
Obstetrics, gynecology, any kind of really healthcare related profession.
So you've had experience with both ophthalmology and optometry.
Mhm.
And how do you see, going through the future for those of us who don't understand it as much? Is there a growing need for optometry and that level of care? Or do you think we just need more ophthalmologists to deal with that kind of care?
Well, primary eye care is an area that ophthalmology, up till now, and probably won't ever have an interest in.
Okay.
The ophthalmology is going to be largely surgical, primarily. Now, some surgeons won't do enough surgery business on their own, so they will supplement with some primary care. But really, ophthalmology is about identifying pathology and then putting treatment therapies in place, most of which involve surgery. So ophthalmology isn't going to take the place. Optometry, primary eye care, the biggest threat, I think, to the profession itself is technology, because much like radiology, optometry is a lot of imaging and a lot of technical um, application. Everyone who's wears glasses or has a prescription has been asked which is better, one or two. And what an optometrist does in large part is a flow chart. And flow charts are easy to replicate with software. And some could argue are much better at it than people are. So I
So
think that unless an optometrist embraces the technology change and figures out a way to utilize it within their own practice and not be threatened by it, then it could have a big impact on primary eye care.
yeah, so what you're hinting at here is AI. AI is going to come in and do a lot of things that maybe was relied
Of
upon
course.
by professionals. So if I'm an optometrist and I'm open-minded and I want to embrace AI and future technologies, then how
Yeah.
do you see that working together?
I think that it enables people to provide eye care services to a larger population than what you could currently do it today. And so if an optometrist can see 25 patients in a day, with embracing technology, you could double that. You could end up seeing 50 patients in a day
Okay.
and not compromising the quality of care of any one of those patients. But you have to recognize your own limits as a practitioner and the unlimited aspects or abilities of software. And back in the early 80s, there was a new piece of equipment that came out called an auto refractor. And it you sat down, everyone who's gone to an eye doctor now goes through an auto refraction, but it basically does the refraction
Yeah.
without a doctor involved. And optometrists back then felt like it was going to be the demise of the profession. This is going to destroy us. And others said, no, this is going to be a tremendous tool for us. We can utilize it. Same goes today with AI.
Yeah, yeah. It's just really interesting to see the changes and the technology and so on. So
Yeah.
yeah, so again, if I'm going forward in private practice and optometry,
Mhm.
what should I focus on? Okay, I'm an owner and I want to make this thing work and I want to continue to. I guess the next question is too, how much of this is third party payer related? Because like in physical therapy and other, that keeps going down. It keeps getting restricted. It keeps getting harder and harder to do. So are
Yeah.
are your younger practitioners looking at cash pay systems or what do they do as far as insurance and third party payers go?
Well, today, private practice optometry is extremely dependent upon third party payers
Yeah.
uh, to their own demise. The and the reluctance to um, push back against that is real, and I understand it's legitimate. That's an advantage. Private practitioners are the third party payers' best friends because they're not organized. And if one says, I don't want to do this anymore, they say, fine, you've got 10 more right behind you that will.
Yeah.
And so, whereas a corporate entity can shut out large segments, and a private practitioner is one office. So it's a big challenge. The other thing that's involved in that is third party payers are now buying practices,
Hmm.
and VSP is one of the largest in the profession, and they launched about 5 years ago VSP Ventures, which now owns VisionWorks, formerly known as iMasters. They own that now, and they've bought up a large number of private practices. And there'll probably come a day when they'll say to their beneficiaries, the employees at companies, if you'll go to one of our locations, your benefits will be much greater than if you
Yeah.
go to one that isn't owned by us. Well, that'll
Sure.
even be a a bigger challenge for the private practitioners. I think my advice today is um, price yourself competitively in the marketplace and go without third party. It's
Yeah.
very difficult to do, but you're in the long run, you'll be better off.
And so you're within your organization, let's just call it a network for lack of a better term, maybe. Do you
Mhm.
go to third-party payers as a network and try and negotiate rates and try and get some leverage with the numbers that you have? Or do you not have that ability to do that?
I do go, we do, but the big players will not will not participate in that. They won't they don't recognize us as an entity. They only negotiate directly with individual doctor practices. So we're not able to have any impact on that.
Yeah. Okay, let's switch gears here a little bit. Let's go into your vast experience as running companies, an entrepreneur, finding opportunities and so on. And I know that you're a
Mhm,
big believer in mindsets. So
mhm.
tell me about what you think mindsets do, and as a private practitioner in your organization or any other entrepreneur that's trying to come into a business, what do you say about mindsets and how important is that?
So mindset is everything, in my view. I take the position that God gave us control over one thing, and that's how we think. And so if that's the only thing he gave you control over, then that pretty much is enough. And so that means mindset is everything. And how you decide to think about something is at your control. And you can change the way you think about things. It's not easy because we tend to be programmed through our experiences. And I just wrote an article about the fact that most people, when they um, look at the future, many people will look at 2025 and be fearful because it's unknown. And
Mhm.
the reason they're fearful is because they have learned that the way you think about things that are unknown is in the negative. Most people don't look at 2025 or next week or tomorrow and think, man, this is the best. I'm so excited to find out what's in store for me.
Yeah, yeah,
Think about the person who looks at possibly losing their job. I've been fired before from a job. A lot of people have. In every instance, when I talk to people that have gone through that, when they think about it and look back, they go, it turns out that was one of the best things that ever happened to me.
yeah,
But when you're going through it, you don't think that way. You could, because it's imagination. You are imagining what your future will look like, and you can't imagine a positive future without the job you currently have. Yes, you can. You can look at it and look at the employer who's getting ready to fire you and say, you're doing me a favor because I'm not sure exactly how or when or why, but it's going to turn out phenomenal. And
yeah,
I think that ability to develop that skill, and it is something you have to develop and believe in, have faith in, is what will make a difference in your life in terms of your success or living a life of kind of mediocrity. And so I'm a huge believer in it, and still practice it. I mean, I go through a morning ritual where I talk to myself and I work at it.
yeah,
So it becomes easier over time, just like anything else you work at.
yeah.
But initially, it's not.
Yeah, it's a lot of times people will say, "Well, what's a really good book I can read, and what's something that I can really help me, in my business development and so on." And even though it's been around a long, long time, the Carol Dweck book is one that's,
Oh,
I mean, it's
tremendous.
like, yeah, it's just it's exactly what you're talking about, and of course, it is called Mindset, and it's a classic, and I think it's still very relevant.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the got a prominent place in my library, and so does Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, which is
Yes,
another one that is rooted in the concept of mindset, and was probably the one that introduced me to the belief in that. And when I mentioned earlier that God gave us control over one thing, and that's the way we think, that is a direct quote from Napoleon Hill, who wrote
yes,
that book. And I shamelessly use it all the time because I
yes,
believe it. I believe it to be
yeah.
true.
Now, another thing I read about you is that you use the term a lot, inner game. So, is that the
Mhm.
Tim Gallwey inner game concept, or is that just a term what does that mean to you?
That what that means to me is what we've been talking about is that
Okay.
your success in life is not set of external circumstances that happen to just fall your way. Your success in life, however you define that, is a product of what you have on the inside of you, largely being the way you think, and your ability to control that.
So when we look at your organization now, the Texas State Optical, and you've described that you had some hit with private equity money coming in, and we talked about there's kind of a shortage of optometrists coming out, and especially ones that want to go into business. What's your future of Texas State Optical? Do you see continued growth? Do you just really focus on who you have? What are you thinking? 3 to 5 years down the road?
I, using what I just spent a few minutes explaining, is I believe the future is very bright. I'm not exactly sure how at this point,
Hmm.
but I do believe in the effort that's being applied by the leadership in the organization. And I believe we will figure out a path forward in a business model that's different than what we've been doing, has to be, but it'll be better. And it'll be better largely because we'll make it better. And with that, I have nothing but optimistic opinion as to what our future will be. We'll have to navigate it through some changing times in the marketplace and in the profession itself. Technology is certainly going to play a part in it. But if we're committed to continuing to provide the best quality of eye care in our smaller communities where we're based, then we'll figure this out.
Yeah, it's a real refreshing answer in the sense that as leaders, we're taught, you have to know the answer and you're supposed to know the answer. I love that you say you don't know, and are willing to say that, yet you have that optimistic view that we'll figure it out, that change is good. I'm going to embrace change. I'm going to try, I'm confident we'll find the right
Absolutely.
answers and the right things. And I think that's refreshing because, again, as I talk with people I work with a lot of times, is you don't have to know all the answers. You just have to be open to change. You have to be willing to try some different things, and you have to be willing to try and get other people on board with the same idea going forward. Because who knows, what it might look like in 3 to 5 years, because it might be totally different.
Absolutely. I've got an acquaintance that I've gotten to know fairly well that his profession is he leads expeditions to the top of Mount Everest.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
which is quite an interesting profession.
Yes.
But he made a comment to me that I've used repeatedly and I believe in, and he said um, one of the things that came in the discussion we were having was how do you learn how to climb mountains? And he said you learn how to climb mountains by climbing mountains.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what this is. We've got a mountain to climb in front of us, and there's going to be a lot of things we're going to learn over the next 3 to 5 years. But as long as we put one foot in front of the other and keep climbing that mountain, we'll figure it out, and we will get to the top.
Well, John, in anticipation of our discussion today, is there anything that I haven't asked you that you for sure want to get into the program that you think we should hear?
But not really. We've touched on a lot of things. I just would make myself available to anyone who would like to talk more or does have questions out there that we didn't cover. They can reach me through our website, tso.com. We have a contact us section on that. And if they'll write a note in there, I'll write them back and we can take it as far as they want to take it in terms of a conversation to follow up with.
And I think it's true. There's I grew up in a similar system where private practice was important and independence is important, yet collaboration is everything. So you can't,
Mhm.
you can usually do better with the knowledge, help, and camaraderie of others than you can do 100% on your own. So the fact that people are willing to learn from each other and come together and work
Yeah.
towards a common goal, anything's possible.
Some of my best thinking and ideas have come from other people.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
for
just,
sure,
it's the way it is.
for sure.
I
You know,
appreciate the
uh,
opportunity.
well, John, at this time in the interview, I always ask my guests the same common question, and that question is, in relation to leadership, what is a pearl of wisdom that you could leave us with today?
Well, leadership is also an inner game. It's an inside out game. And it starts with personal growth and making yourself the best you can be. I'm a student of John Maxwell, who is a noted author on leadership,
Yep.
who defines leadership as influence. And the ability to develop influence is becoming someone who's got something of value to offer and contribute, and that starts with working on yourself. And you don't aspire and become a good leader because you're handed a title. You become a good leader because you work on yourself first. And if you can't lead yourself, then you're not going to be very successful having influence on other people.
Yeah, yeah, that's well said. Well, John, this has been a pleasure. It's really, as I said earlier, was intriguing to me, the parallels between private practice optometry and private practice pharmacy and private practice physical therapy. And of course, there's
Yeah,
many, many, many other examples of that where, I kind of think the American dream or way is to kind of, have some control and kind of do your own thing. Yet we also know that, being open to collaborative ideas and working together and whatever is also beneficial. So,
absolutely.
yeah, there's room for both for sure. And sometimes companies need private equity money to get to the next level and help them learn and grow in different ways. So
Sure.
it's not totally evil. It's not totally something that you should avoid, and sometimes it's right for some people. So
Sure.
I guess that's the beauty of being in business is you can make those decisions and go with whichever direction you want to go.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for your time today. I really appreciate it, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you very much. I
Okay.
appreciate your invitation.
Take care, John. Bye bye. Thank you for listening to another episode of Profiles in Leadership. To listen to all my interviews, subscribe to Profiles in Leadership with Steve Anderson on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, and many other popular podcast platforms. Some of these interviews are on video, and you can search YouTube for Profiles in Leadership with Steve Anderson. You can also access the entire library of interviews on my website, orange.coaching.com, and that is orange, the word, .coaching.com, and go to the Media Center and click on Podcasts or Video Gallery. You can also enter the website from pilpodcast.com.